It blows my mind that something like this can be said on Capitol Hill, but I bet most of you haven't heard anything about it. What you're about to see is a sitting member of Congress asking a respected astrophysicist about the different types of alien or extraterrestrial species that the US government has allegedly come into contact with.
Do you have or can you comment on whatever species have been piloting these craft? How are they large? Are they multiple species? Are they like what was their size and how many are usually on a craft?
They're typically the multiple species. People are familiar with the Greys, the Nordics. People are talking about reptilians and insectoids. It's not that they're reptilian or insectoid, it's that they resemble to the percipient, a reptile or an insect type humanoid, because they have this a head and four limbs and torso.
So, large, small?
Human size, human scale.
And are there how many are crewed?
Well, the Greys I'm familiar with from investigating the crash at Corona, which is misnamed the crash in Roswell. It's not the crash in Roswell, it's the crash in Corona, New Mexico. Those were Greys, those were 4 foot tall. And the Nordics are typically human size, probably, I've heard 5, 6 feet tall. And same with the people who mislabel reptilian and insectoid, they're roughly that height too. I haven't heard anything about anything 7 or 8 feet or 9 feet tall.
What? What did you just say? How are more people not talking about this? I don't know if this is true or not true. I've got no evidence. All I know is that Eric Davis, who is well known for his involvement in classified U.S. government programs, is telling a sitting member of Congress, a member of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Eric Burleson, that the U.S. government is aware of 4 different types of alien species. What? Now, this was just a very small part of a 4-hour-long briefing. Not a full hearing, but a briefing that took place on Capitol Hill. It was hosted by the House Oversight Committee and the nonprofit, the UAP Disclosure Fund. Joining me now is one of the other speakers at that briefing, Mike Gold. He is a former NASA Associate Administrator and the current president of Civil and International Space at Redwire. Mike, how are you?
I am always good when I'm talking to you, Kristen. It's wonderful to reconnect. Thank you for all the terrific journalism you've done in the space field.
Aw, thanks, Mike. You know, it's always a pleasure to interview you because you speak in plain English. You know, you're one of the few people I think in the space industry that really just speaks like an average person and not a rocket scientist. And
I'm
it's so
too
refreshing.
stupid. I'm too stupid not to. I'm not smart enough to do otherwise.
No, I actually think that's a sign of even higher intelligence that you can do both.
Well, thank
But
you.
maybe not alien intelligence, right? We're not quite there yet.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. Mike, you know, I watched this 4-hour briefing from beginning to end yesterday. Some of it we'd heard before. A lot of it was new. Some of it was just absolutely bonkers. And I'm sitting here today and I can't believe that some of this was said on Capitol Hill before sitting members of Congress. And yet you look at what's been written and said about it in the mainstream legacy media, and there's just not much.
There is an extraordinary dichotomy between the significance of what was discussed and the coverage of the issue. And whether you believe or not, whether it's accurate or not, you think getting that information in front of people would be worthwhile for mainstream journalists. It's been so disappointing to me. And again, this is the pernicious stigma surrounding the issue. If we can't get it into the public discourse, then you're not going to see proper funding, proper attention, or real science being done. So that's why I'm very grateful to you and other reporters who are getting the story out, who are talking about what happened, because that's the only way we're going to make progress.
So if you were going to write a headline to summarize what happened at this briefing, what would the headline be?
Probably be that government officials testify to the existence of a legacy alien crash retrieval program and additional evidence relative to UAP.
Part of the reason I really wanted to talk to you is you're like me, right? Like we don't know anything for sure, right? But what you're talking about and the reason I'm here today is because we don't know anything, but we know enough to know that we need to know more. And
Absolutely.
at your testimony, which was a full hearing back in November, and when you spoke at this briefing just yesterday, my sense of it was that that's really the crux of it for you, that you're calling for just more data, more information, more questions, more coverage. Do I have that right?
Absolutely. I'm calling for science. I'm calling for the use of the scientific method. Let's take the image that I presented from Apollo 17, taken from the surface of the moon, of what looked to be a triangular craft. As I mentioned, I'm no scientist. I don't speak that language, so I'm not qualified to say what it is or isn't. But I think any layperson viewing that image and then looking at some of the other imagery of potential UAP that we've seen from the military, that we've seen from civilians, that we've seen from pilots, it is strikingly similar. So I don't know what that is, but I do know that it's worth investigating and that there are numerous other images like that in the NASA archives. And as I asked, we should be doing a AI ML search that would be very affordable, could be done relatively quickly. You probably have companies volunteering to do this. Let's gather that data, see what we can find out, and try to get to some answers. Again, I don't have the solution, but I do know the path forward, which is to gather more evidence. And that's why I'm happy to be on your show. I went to Capitol Hill. Unless and until we do that, I am going to continue to call for an archival review so we can at least know what data we have and hopefully conduct some analysis.
And so I know you're not at NASA anymore, you're with Redwire, but describe to me the kind of resistance that you did encounter or would encounter when you were like, hey, we just need to do a review of the data that we already have, or like what was the resistance? What would people say when they would kind of shut it down?
I think there is mixed views at NASA. NASA's a big organization like any other. You have people and even leaders who are very interested in the UAP topic, very supportive of it, very engaged. And then you have some who think it's a complete waste of time. NASA is no different than the general public. I do have to give a great deal of credit to the former NASA administrator, Bill Nelson. He was obviously a former senator, and I think you've seen great leadership from the Senate in this issue, so I'm not surprised by that. Just the fact that NASA formed a UAP independent study team, I think is very important for pushing back on the stigma. So it was very effective, I think, in that fashion. What has been less effective is the follow through, that I haven't seen NASA go and do an archival search. They haven't moved forward in the other issue that I've been calling for is the Aviation Safety Reporting System, ASRS. This is a system that has been in operation for decades, has logged hundreds of thousands of confidential reports relative to anomalies, safety issues, safety problems. That's the purpose of the system. Again, with very little cost and relatively little effort, you could add to ASRS to include UAP. And the amount of data that we could generate from that by leveraging all civilian pilots, commercial crews, commercial pilots, commercial space, again, we would gather so much data with so little action. So I do think that we should be supportive and compliment NASA on creating the UAP independent study team, but now we need to encourage follow through. Now, as you know, we are in a very, very tough budget scenario with NASA. So I'd be the last to put any more on their plate. But I do think at least these two actions, reviewing the archives and including UAP in the ASRS system, could be done in an affordable fashion. Yet the data that we get from it would be extraordinary and the investment would be relatively low.
One of the other pictures that you introduced at the briefing was from Firefly Aerospace's recent lunar landing. The Blue Ghost lunar lander, Redwire, had a payload on there. Tell me about that image and why you thought it was so pertinent to the conversation.
Just a spectacular image, and thank you for referencing it. Our friends at Firefly had an incredibly successful mission. On board the Blue Ghost lander were Redwire Argus cameras, and our camera captured this image of what's called the lunar horizon glow. This is a phenomena that we first saw with the Surveyor missions, and it looks like a sunrise or a dome.
I think it's important to point out when you see this image, that's not the sun, that's not the
Yes.
moon, it's not Earth. It's like what is that light source, right?
Yeah, pretty amazing, right? It's not the sun, it's not Earth. We're on the moon, so it can't be the moon. What is it? And NASA's explanation has been that it's lunar dust that is being electrostatically charged and then rising due to the charge and creating this extraordinary effect. Again, I'm not a scientist, certainly not a lunar geologist, but I have seen reports and heard from other scientists that when we use such missions as LADEE and they were actually looking at the dust, that they did not see sufficient dust to create this effect. And during experiments here on Earth, we also haven't seen this electrostatically charged dust could even do this. So again, I'm not saying one way or the other, but I am saying that there's enough controversy or lack of confirmation that it might be something extraordinary.
And this was a phenomenon that was also observed by the Apollo astronauts, right?
Absolutely. What the Apollo astronauts saw, and I presented sketches of this during the presentation, and there were two flavors of what they saw. One was the dome-like structure on the horizon, and another were high altitude, essentially beams of light coming from the surface. We didn't capture the beams of light on Blue Ghost. We captured that lunar horizon, the dome-like structure. And by the way, it was so bright, it was creating shadows. If you look at the shadows from the rocks, and if you look at the picture, when I first saw them, it looked like there was algae on the moon. In fact,
Yeah.
that is light refracting from something.
That's how
creating
bright it
hues.
was.
Exactly. And even purples. And that means that light is traveling through some sort of substance to create that refraction. And one of the things I was saying, and this is how we should investigate, where's the spectroscopy relative to what was happening there? And while we got these photos from Firefly on their Flickr account, what we need is raw imagery, timestamps, more detailed versions of those pictures. These are all things relative to transparency, again, that if there was even a rudimentary effort to focus on these issues, we should be getting more of this data out. And again, even if it isn't something extraordinary or extraterrestrial, there, I think, is a good chance that there's a phenomena occurring here that we don't understand. And it's anomalies like that that could lead to amazing discoveries in terms of substances, perhaps, on the moon that we didn't understand before. Even if, let's go back to the triangular image, even if it isn't a alien craft, and again, we need to keep an open mind. Again, this is what science is about. Let's not jump to conclusions. But let's say, for example, it was debris or water ice of some sort. That too would be extraordinarily interesting. So follow the science, follow the data, and let's then embrace whatever the conclusions lead us to, no matter how mundane or extraordinary they might be. What I find so just really gets to me is the lack of desire, the lack of interest.
And the lack of interest in a topic that, let's just say it is true, or even a fraction of it is true, it would be the biggest story ever known to humankind, right? Like that we are not alone in the universe. Like how could there be such a lack of interest in a topic of that magnitude? That's what I struggle to understand.
To use a corporate term, your ROI is extraordinarily high on this. The return on investment of, again, a relatively modest effort to go through the archives, to gather data, yet make perhaps one of the most extraordinary discoveries in the history of humanity would be amazing. And again, what is the worst case scenario? That you discover a brand new natural phenomenon that could substantially enhance our understanding of the moon, of nature, of the universe? I just see very little downside and incredible upside to tackling this issue in a serious way. And again, what's so disappointing is the lack of attention, not just at the agency, but in the public at large, because ultimately NASA, Congress will be influenced by the public discourse, which is why I go to Capitol Hill, which is why we at Redwire are so excited about the incredible nature of these imagery and why we're so grateful to you and other reporters that are trying to get the word out on this important topic.
Well, of course, some of the other speakers at the UAP briefing would say it's even more nefarious than a lack of interest, right? Like it's a systematic, whoops. Like they would say it's a systematic government cover up, right? Like folks in the Pentagon or in the intelligence community not wanting this stuff to get out.
Yeah, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I can't speak to that issue, although I do have a tremendous amount of respect for heroes, patriots like Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, and every member of Congress that showed up at this event. So I do tend to take that quite seriously. But what I was there to say is that it's very difficult to get the classified material. It's very difficult to burrow into national security activities, worth doing, quite clearly. But what I'm pointing out is that there is information publicly available now that you can go to look
Not
at.
classified.
Not classified, unclassified. Every image that I showed, you can go back on a link to the NASA archives and see exactly what I saw. And who knows what else is out there. And that's why I was trying and have been trying to tell people, let's at least take the time to look at what we have. I don't know that it's going to be as dispositive as someone saying that, oh, Department of Defense has been doing X or Y, but it's certainly going to be informative. And again, certainly going to be worthwhile. The other concern that I have from a national security perspective, and really there are two, is first, in this era of drones and UAV, I worry that the stigma surrounding UAP could be used as a loophole for Chinese or Russian or Korean even systems to be able to pose as UAP, and then we ignore it due to the stigmatization of the topic. That is the last thing we want to see happen. And if you look at many of the incidents that were discussed yesterday, like Nimitz, we're seeing these systems, anomalies show up around military exercises, military facilities, nuclear plants, nuclear rockets, nuclear missiles. To sweep those incidents under the rug, I think is a real threat to national security. And as I said yesterday, if there's even a small chance that we are truly dealing with exotic technology, we cannot risk technological surprise. We cannot risk falling behind China in those issues. As I said, let's not let a lack of vision turn into a lack of freedom.
And by exotic technologies, I think that includes some of what Eric Davis was talking about yesterday.
Absolutely.
We have to talk about this because I think the most sensational part of yesterday's briefing was when a member of Congress asked Eric Davis about the different types of extraterrestrials that Eric Davis said he had direct knowledge of. Were you in the room when he said this?
Indeed, I was.
What was it like in the room when that happened? What did you think?
It's interesting because I have conflicting thoughts when I heard that. One is that it's not a surprise to me. I have been hearing Eric talk about these things, others for years, if not decades. This is nothing new. What's new is the forum, that for the first time, these issues are coming out on Capitol Hill, talking to members, and that is so important. And just the fact that that briefing took place, that there have been several hearings, that is substantial progress. And seeing these stories, seeing potential evidence, and the whistleblowers get beyond the UAP bubble is what I'm so excited about. But to be clear, none of this is new. Even the imagery that I'm showing, and you'll see other images from Apollo missions, from space shuttle missions, reports from astronauts like Edgar Mitchell. It's all out there. This has been discussed for literally decades. It's just now that policymakers are getting exposed to the same information that the UAP community has been looking at for years. So that's what I was excited about, and was extraordinary for Eric to have that opportunity to talk to the members. But what I'm still disappointed by is the lack of coverage in the mainstream media from what are just blockbuster comments. Whether they're true or not, the fact that people of this heritage and pedigree are talking about these extraordinary things, I think just reporting on that is worthwhile, even if you're not taking a position on their veracity or not.
I could not agree more. And I think that is one of the things that I was thinking about as I was going through the headlines, or lack thereof, today. To have somebody like Eric Davis say what he did yesterday, even though it wasn't a full hearing, it was just a briefing, they were still sitting members of Congress in there. And if even just a little bit of what he said were true, it would completely upend our understanding of the world, the universe as we know it. I mean, it would be the biggest thing ever. So I'll never get over the fact that what was said, and it generated as little response from the public as it did.
I do take solace in that hopefully that was a beginning of a conversation, not an ending, and that I hope that there will be another hearing, and we'll see Eric Davis, we'll see Christopher Mellon testify. And what scares me, again, is that if, as you say, even a small percentage of this is true, it is a dramatic national security threat if we fall behind China due to the stigmatization of the issue. And when I was on the NASA UAP independent study team, to be clear, there was great courage shown by particularly the academics in our team, that they were literally threatened. Their careers were threatened, not for saying UAP was real, but for just having the temerity to look at the issue. That's how bad the stigma is.
Just talking about it.
Just for being a part of that committee, just for looking at it, that if you dare to have a degree of objectivity on this issue, many, if not most in academia, will punish you for it. And to me, that is the antithesis of how science should be done. So if we're not taking it seriously, and or if we are compartmentalizing the research to the extent that we don't have coordination, we don't have cooperation, and we don't have our top people looking at it, and we fall behind China, that is a huge threat to America's national security, to the free world's national security, as well as to our economy.
So after the briefing, do you feel more optimistic? Do you feel like this briefing moved the needle at all?
I'm more optimistic than ever. If you had told me 5 years ago, or even a year ago, that I would be on Capitol Hill at a hearing of the House Oversight Committee talking about the potential of non-human intelligence, I wouldn't have believed that it would even be possible. The fact now that there have been 2 hearings recently on the topic, that we held this briefing, that a third is being planned, and again, kudos to Congresswoman Luna, to Burchett, to Congressman Burleson, for having the courage to go after this, because it does take courage. I don't think that these members are going to benefit politically from tackling this topic, which is why I hope that your listeners and others call in and express their support to these brave members for their efforts to get transparency and accountability on this important issue. I don't know what the answer is, but I know that the question is worth asking.
Final question, and I know you have to go. You've been very generous with your time, Mike. What would you say to anybody watching this who completely shuts it down the minute they hear UFO, UAPs, and they're just like, these are crazy people. What do you say to those people who just aren't buying any of this?
I say, do you believe in the scientific method? Do you believe in science? Because if you do, then you should be fascinated and focused on anomalies, whether it's the theory of general relativity, quantum mechanics, and the progress in both of those fields. They were all driven by the study of anomalies. So if you're not interested in anomalous data, you're missing the point of how we can progress, how we can learn. And by the way, there's a bit of historical precedence for this, that humanity used to believe that Earth was the center of the universe and the sun rotated around us. Then we find out that's not true. And I heard the people who were the initial proponents of that took some slings and arrows back in the day. Now, for the first time, we have potential evidence of biological life on another planet. I believe that if history has taught us anything, it's that we need to be more and more modest as to how unique or special Earth and humanity is, which is why these questions are worth asking. And I would say for any skeptics, follow the science. Look at the data. Look at the pictures. Truth is out there. We just have to be bold enough and brave enough to face it.
Mike Gold, thank you so much. You are truly one of my favorite people in the entire space industry to talk to and interview. Thank you.
Oh, you're truly one of my favorite reporters. Thanks for all you do, Kristen. Great weekend with long process.
Okay. Ah, wait. There we go.
You got it. You're an honorary Vulcan.
Bye. Have a great
Thank you.
weekend.